For the past 2 weeks, I've been reporting from Marrakech, Morocco, the site of the 22nd Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The Moroccan hosts have called this the COP of Action. It focuses on some really specific issues, and a lot of the conversations here have been quite technical. One of the outcomes is supposed to be moving towards a rule book for the Paris Agreement. So this includes things like how are countries accounting for the climate finance that they're putting forward? What are some of the transparency requirements that need to be put in place? And how can countries be supported as they try to report on those things that they're doing at home? After a couple of days of early celebration of the Paris Agreement, a lot of attention shifted to the US election. After Trump won the election on Tuesday night, there was a palpable change in the atmosphere here. A cloud of uncertainty really descended on Marrakech. Delegates were wondering, what this would mean for the negotiations going forward. Would countries be hesitant, reluctant to be as ambitious in their targets and commitments, not knowing what the United States is going to do in the near term? That said, Trump's election also created an opportunity for countries to step forward and recommit themselves to the goals of the Paris Agreement. Country after country said, we're here, we're going to maintain our promises, we're going to stay engaged in this process, regardless of what the United States does. China, in particular, has emerged as a leader in this forum, and Chinese delegates have said repeatedly that if the United States doesn't want to play a leading role anymore, they'll be happy to. But despite those reassuring signals, there's still some big questions here to tackle, not least of all the issue of climate finance. The estimates of what developing countries will need in terms of financing to adapt to the impacts of climate change are huge. Hundreds of billions of dollars. Compared to the resources that have actually been put up to help them, public finance in particular, the gap is huge. And a lot of the discussion has focused on how to help narrow it. One of the features of the Paris Agreement is a commitment by developed countries to put forward $100 billion in climate finance by 2020. And that's just supposed to be a floor. Presumably they'll increase their commitments after that. So one of the things that's happened here in Marrakech is that donors have produced a roadmap showing how they'll achieve that pledge. Developing countries have taken some issue with it. They say that the way that the accounting works, there's some double counting. Developed countries are combining ODA and climate finance and considering them sort of the same thing. So there's some real questions and a little uncertainty about what the future looks like in terms of achieving the commitment that developed countries have laid out. The bigger picture here is that there's huge momentum towards a low-carbon future. Developed and developing countries alike are both making the case that investing in renewable energies, energy efficiency, moving away from fossil fuels is not only in the interests of the global climate, but in their own best interests as they look at what successful economies are going to be like in the future. These COPs provide an opportunity for multilateral organizations, donor countries, developing country groups to come forward with new commitments that are really demonstrating their sincerity in supporting this effort. So we've seen a number of those this week. And in spite of Donald Trump's election, there's been a rallying cry from a broad spectrum of different actors. 365 business leaders and investors came forward and said they still want the United States to be involved in the Paris Agreement. They see this as in their own best interest, in their country's best interest. We've also seen a number of countries come forward with longer-term strategies, 2050 strategies. These are projecting what it would look like for them to aggressively confront climate change by the middle of the century, and looking at some of the pathways that they might have to pursue to do that. Whether this wide array of individual initiatives and programs can really be packaged together into something comprehensive and integrated and amount to a really aggressive, strategic approach to confronting the challenges of climate change. That's a conversation that will extend well beyond Marrakech. A lot of the meetings here in Marrakech have been about setting up the next meetings, and of course we'll be there to report back on what development professionals need to know about them.